Hello, everyone. I'm Summer Chen. I'm your moderator today. I will do my best to ensure you have the best experience in our room. I will share the room rule in the chat. Please read them and then put your question in the Q&A section. Your speaker guy will save the time at the end of his presentation to answer the questions you have. So our speaker, Guy Siegel, is a design leader with 25 years of experience in tech, focusing on UX and product design. He's on journey to redefine what it means to be a successful design professional. So Guy also have a design podcast called Design Downtime. Well, let's give a warm welcome to our speaker, Guy Siegel.
Ooh, Summer, thank you so much for this amazing introduction. I don't think I could have asked for a better one. And hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for taking the time to spend an hour with me. And as Summer said, I'm a design director, I'm a mentor on ADP List, and I'm super passionate about communication and especially improving the way we communicate with other people. Um, I really love this topic because at least 90% of our role as designers is based on communication. A lot of it is taking the ideas you have in your head and sharing them with other people, having some sort of a common ground of understanding. And I'm really excited to talk about design critiques today. So, what am I going to be talking about? I'll start by defining what a design critique is, and what it isn't, why it's such a beneficial tool. The meat of the presentation will be a very simple framework, a four-step framework for running a design critique, hopefully a painless one, as the title says. I'm going to give a few more details about the three roles that participate in a design critique and um, talk a bit at the end about how to do a good job of being on the receiving end of a design critique. So let's get started. But before we start, the first thing I want to do is I want to make a distinction. A lot of times there's confusion between design critiques and design reviews. And I want to make sure that we all understand what this session is about. So, a design review is a tool or an activity that comes to answer a simple question. Is this artifact ready to go to the next phase? For example, are these, is this wireframe ready to move to a high fidelity design phase? Is this final design ready to go to development, for example? And a critique is something different. And this is what this part of the talk is going to be about. I'm going to define what a design critique is. I always like to start with a bit of an interactive element, some participation from the audience. So, Summer is gonna put a poll on the screen and really answer a simple question. When was the last time you participated in a design critique? When was the last time you participated in a design critique? I'll give you a few seconds. Okay, I'm actually quite surprised by the results here. Usually, the situation is a bit more dire, but we definitely have um, about a third of the people participating who um, have participated in a design critique more than 6 months ago, or maybe never. And now I want to switch to another question, and that is, when was the last time You had your own work critiqued. You were the person presenting something, and the group was critiquing it. Awesome. And I'm waiting for Summer to share the results. Okay. Fairly similar results. So, those of you who um, said they have not participated, and those who have participated, if you've ever been in a design critique, whether it was your own um, work being critiqued or you watch someone else, I'd love to, if you can use the like the reaction emojis. Uh, by emojis, if you can show me, raise your hand or clap or whatever it is there. Have you ever uh, have you ever left a design critique feeling defeated and less excited about your work? And Summer, you can you can close the poll. So I definitely saw some emojis going up there, and it's a quite a common experience. Um, and why is that? Looking at the data and feedback from a lot of teams, there are two main reasons why teams attempt to do a critique, a design critique, but then don't really repeat it. The main reason is designers are afraid of being essentially their work being completely torn apart. So they don't want to do it. Why would you, like, you had a bad experience? You're not really rushing to repeat it. The other is that because there's no good structure of how to do a design critique, there's no understanding of what the goal actually is, there's a lot of time wasted. So you end up with a session that is very unfocused. And we all love meetings that have no focus or a clear agenda or a goal. So again, we're not rushing to repeat that experience. And that's because we don't always know the difference between critique and criticism. When we think about all those past bad experiences with design critiques, what we most likely experienced is criticism. It's a passing of judgment, is finding fault with the work. This is wrong. It felt very personal. Um, it felt like the criticism was really against us. Whereas a critique aims to do the opposite of that. It asks questions instead of making statements and passes judgment. It is removes the personal aspect and makes it more about the design work as an artifact. And I'll talk about when I get to the third section, when I talk about the framework of how to do a painless design critique. Again, I'm going to teach a very simple way of doing all those things that pose questions instead of using statements. They're all going to be about not about the person who's presenting the work, and it's all going to be cooperative. A really important thing to remember is that a good critique is a creative task. You're creating something as a group rather than destroying something. Because a really well done critique is respectful of the people participating in it. It takes away the passion, meaning you're not attacking, you're not defending, you're talking about the work as the work itself. It doesn't come from a place of authority. It's not one person telling another person, this is what you should be doing and this is how you should fix it. And it's everything that's being discussed comes from justifications. And you'll see through the framework how that is reinforced by the structure of the critique. So let's talk a bit about what those benefits are to a really good critique. And there's quite a few of those. First and foremost, a design critique, the main goal of a design critique is to improve the design itself. That's the reason the presenter is presenting the work. What can I do to make it better? But through improving that design, we also become better designers ourselves. And we really build that trust as a group of designers all working together. This is really important because a good design critique, instead of making us hate showing our stuff to other people, it's actually going to increase that um, psychological safety we have with our fellow designers. And we would actually, it should encourage us to share more of the work with them. It also helps the team to think better and discuss design ideas because you're all have a shared activity of talking about design, sometimes from a very philosophical perspective, if you need to. I really love the third bullet here, teaching non-designers. Once you become comfortable with your team and sharing your work and having it critiqued, it's a really good opportunity to bring people from outside of the design team or design organization. You can bring in developers, you can bring in project managers, you can bring in product managers, you can bring people from marketing, and you bring them into this activity. And by watching and participating, they get to learn the vocabulary, the terminology we use to talk about design. And it also makes them understand design better and understand the design is not just the pretty things they see on the screen. There's a whole process and really deep thinking behind it. And it makes them able to communicate with you on a higher level. And I really this is something that's really important for me to kind of emphasize. I really want you to think about a design critique as an educational experience. Not only for the person presenting, of course, they're learning something by showing stuff and getting feedback on it, but also for everyone else participating. It's really important that when you go into a design critique, even if you're not showing anything, even if you're not presenting, as an audience, I invite you to try to go in with a mindset of what can I learn from this work and what can I take back to my own work. So now I talked a bit about what a design critique is, why it's great, what are the benefits. Now I'm going to talk about how to actually run a design critique. Um, I didn't invent any of this. I took it from a lot of different sort of compiled from different talks and books that I read about this. But again, nothing here is rocket science. It's really, really simple and powerful at the same time because it's simple. This, as I said earlier, this design critique framework has 4 steps. The first 2 steps are done by the person who presents the work. The other 2 steps are done by the audience, the people observing and participating. And as I mentioned earlier, this very simple structure of a design critique really mean to take away the personal, the subjective aspect of all those bad design critiques we've all been part of. And it's not about right or wrong. It's about how we learn together as a team from the work that we're all experiencing and how we can make it better. So and what we can how we can make our own work better. So let's start. Step number one is called setting the table. This is where you, as the presenter, you're going to let the audience know what they're about to see. And I have here a very simple script that's going to walk you through it and give you an example. But again, you can use anything you want. So you're setting the context. And first of all, you tell them what stage this work is. And again, you can modify it however you want. You don't have to say anything I'm saying here. The main thing is really set a context to what they're going to see. So first of all, it's sometimes it's quite important to say what stage the work is at because you don't want people to give you feedback on things that are very in a very early stage. I remember I was once presenting work to a client, and I presented wireframes, but the client didn't know I was going to present wireframes. They expected to see final designs. I don't think they've ever seen wireframes or knew what wireframes were. And I present those wireframes. I thought of like I had didn't think about it a second, like didn't give it a second thought. I was presenting wireframes, and they got so upset that it really stayed with me. Like they got so upset. Why are you showing me things in black and white? It was silly. I don't know why they had that reaction, but again, setting a context, setting expectations. I'm going to show you something that's in early stages does a wonders to setting that expectation. And then it's really important to say what problem you're solving. Like I'm going to show you something that addresses this kind of user issue. And sometimes it's really important to explain why it's a problem. It might be someone who sometimes you don't need to because you're showing it to people that you've worked with on this for weeks and everyone is very versed in what's happening. Sometimes you're showing it to a senior stakeholder and this is the first time they're looking at this. They maybe, were at a kickoff 2 months ago. You really need to make sure that everyone there knows the context, know what you're solving, and know why you're solving it. And this is really important. You want to set the tone to what kind of feedback you're looking for. Again, I remember presenting, I would say, mid stage work to a client. And I take all the blame. I use lorem ipsum for copy. I know it's wrong, but I used lorem ipsum. I was a young designer. And I did not set expectations around what feedback I'm looking for. I was looking for feedback around page structure, but I didn't say it. And they're looking at it and they start giving me feedback about what is this language? I don't understand what it says. And again, I could have avoided that very easily if I told them I'm looking for feedback about page structure and what I'm not looking for feedback on. I'm specifically not looking for feedback here on the copy. I'm not looking for feedback on imagery. I'm not looking for feedback on color choices. It's really important to say what feedback you're looking on so they know what to focus on, but also what you don't want them to focus on. Because doesn't matter who you show it to, people will always, if you don't direct them in the right direction, they will give you feedback on things that you don't care about. And again, can derail the conversation. So, this is step one, setting the table. Second step comes right after the first one, and it's kind of a no brainer. This is where you actually present the work. You walk them through your work, but really make sure to avoid what's called the real estate tour, where you start describing everything on the page. Let's say you show a web page, a homepage of a website, and you start with on the top left here, you can see the logo of the company. On the top right, there's a search bar. Skip all the things that are established practices. You don't need to explain all that. Only present the things that are relevant to the problem you're solving. Unless, of course, the problem was we don't know where to put the search bar. So those are the two steps. The first one, setting the context, setting the table, helping them understand what stage the work is at, what problem you're solving and why, what feedback you're looking for, what feedback you're not looking for. And then you present the work. And that's when, once you finish, that's where step three comes in. And that's where the audience is going to critique the work. And I really like this visual example of how not to give feedback. And this is, I love using it in presentations. This is what I affectionately call the poop sandwich. And why do I call it a poop sandwich? This is that sandwich where a lot of times people who really don't like conflict, they would start with a compliment, then they would just pile on all the problems they see with your work, and then they would end with, "Oh, actually, yeah, good job." Of course, when you people give you feedback or critique your work this way, you're not fooled. No one's tricking you here. Do you know that once you hear that compliment first thing, everything that's going to come after is going to destroy your ego? And again, this is what we're trying to avoid with this framework. So what I say is say no to the poop sandwich. Instead, I'm going to show you two steps that will make the critique much more positive experience. So, first, we start with the good. The audience of the critique will go around whatever order you think makes sense, and they're going to say what is good about the solution. And I'd love to get some. I always like to ask the audience, anyone has any? Can anyone tell me why we start with the good and why it's so important to start with the good? And you can drop it in the chat if you want. We have Elizabeth says get buy-in. Reduce defensiveness. That kind of like sounds a bit kind of like a poop sandwich approach in a bit. People will listen. The good gets the people going. Morale. Those are all good answers. However, that's not the main reason. Uh, it's really not about morale. It's really not about making the person feel better or lower defenses when, before the bad comes. The good is really critical because what you're doing is you're letting the presenter know what's working. And if they know what's working, they're not going to waste time changing something that is good. This is really important because after the critique, they have a lot of feedback. They have things to take into consideration, to think about. They don't need to think about the things that are working and are helping to solve the problem. That's why it's really important to make sure that the presenter knows what they don't need to worry about so they can focus on the things that they that do make sense to consider. So that's step number 3. What is working with the design? And of course, if we have step 3 the good, step 4 is the bad. But this is not really where people start pointing out all the things that are wrong. And again, like I said, this framework is intended in a very, very simple way to move away from those statements. If you remember the difference between criticism and critique, criticism is judgment, critique is asking questions. You really want to focus on questions and having a curious mind instead of making those statements. Instead of saying, "Oh, this logo doesn't really make sense here," you can ask, "How do you see the logo relating to the rest of the page?" Instead of saying, "Well, I think you should place, this element on the second page," you can ask, What about different placements? Have you explored different placements for that section? The whole thing about asking questions instead of making statements is that they can inspire new solutions instead of dictating a specific direction. And I'm going to teach you a really simple tool for asking those questions. And this is about really forcing yourself and training yourself to start every feedback questions at a design critique with two magical words. And those two words are have you. And I'll give you examples. Instead of asking, why did you put the logo on the bottom right of the screen? You can ask, have you considered how this placement of the logo works with more traditional websites? Instead of asking, why did you use two columns on the page instead of one? You can ask, have you considered different layouts? The whole purpose of asking these have you questions is to avoid assuming that you know the answer. And this is really the big secret of the painless design critique is going into a critique as the audience with the mindset of I don't have all the information. I don't know exactly what the designer did, what they explored, what they thought about, what they didn't think about, and I shouldn't assume anything. A lot of times when people in critique ask questions, what they're actually expressing their opinion. When someone asks, why did you do this and not that? What they're really trying to say is, you should do that second thing I mentioned. But by asking, have you, you're opening the door to learning something new. And what do I mean by that? Let's say, for example, the presenter has um, did not the presenter um, didn't consider um, other layout options. So by asking, have you considered other layout options? They can say, I haven't. Let me explore that. Again, you're not assuming that they did or didn't. You're asking, have you considered other layout options? And if they haven't, they can say, I haven't. It's a good idea. Let me look into it. On the other hand, if they have looked into other layout options and they decided on the one they showed, and I don't know why, but they have their own reasons. By asking, have you explored other layout options? They can say, I have. I explored this one, and that's why I didn't go with it. And I explored this one, and this is why I didn't go with it. Again, I'm not assuming I know the reasons behind the design. I'm not assuming I know better. I'm not assuming the presenter is an idiot, which is a lot of times is kind of implied from the questions of why didn't you do this or why did you do it this way? By asking have you, you're giving the presenter, you're opening them the door, opening a door for them to say either gracefully say, I haven't considered it. Let me look into it. You're giving them another idea, direction, option. And if they have, and I'm just not aware of it, they can tell me. They can give me more context into what they explored and why they decided to go with this. So those are the four steps of the critique: setting the table, presenting the work, and then the audience says what works and asks questions about the things they're unsure about in order, again, to learn together as a group. Once the critique is over, there are a couple of things. First of all, make sure you have notes from the critique and then, share them out. Um, Make sure everyone who was in the critique is aligned on what was discussed and decided. It's amazing how many times you come out of a meeting, doesn't have to be a critique, any sort of meeting, and every person is sure that everyone else has the same understanding of what just happened and how many times that's incorrect. That's why those after meeting notes are so important to make sure that people understand exactly what happened there. Let's go quickly over the three roles that participate in a design critique. First, we have, as obviously, the presenter. That's the person who shares the work, and they're supposed to describe the problem and present the designs, of course. I think there's going to be a PDF share out with all these slides. I have additional slides here that give a bit more context and information, but again, I don't want to bore you with slides filled with text. So let's go to the second role. Of course, that's the audience. The audience is anyone who's not presenting, and they have two roles. They need to understand the problem statement and the context. And if you're in the audience and you don't understand that, make sure the presenter explains it until you do, because otherwise you don't have context to understand if the solution is good or not. And then once it's presented, ask as many questions as you can. There's a third role that's not mandatory, but highly recommended. A lot of times, the person presenting, it's really hard for them to take notes while they present, while they answer questions from the audience. Um, it can be really helpful to designate someone else from the audience to be a facilitator, to make sure that everyone stays on agenda, take notes, and then hold the presenter accountable for next steps. Last, I'm going to talk very quickly about how to receive critique. What does it mean to be on the receiving end of that critique? Um, it's always good for communication, for good communication, is active listening. Don't listen from a defensive place. Don't try to defend the work. Remember that the purpose of a critique is that shared understanding, not you versus the audience. Take the time to really reflect and then go away after the critique. Make whatever changes you think are necessary. You don't have to take anything, you don't have to change anything if you don't think it makes sense. But consider that, do whatever changes you need to, and then get another critique going. I really love to end with this quote. Um, Anyone that makes anything must find ways to not only obtain feedback, but to master the skills of milking it for all it's worth. There are very few activities that are better than a design critique for really milking that feedback from an audience. Thank you very much. And I think now we have time for questions.
Wow, that was very, very insightful critique section. I just learned I always give a poop sandwich critique when I'm critiquing other people's work. So I learned about the major word have you to start with have you. So thank you so much for that. Now I'm holding up the questions on the stage.
Okay, so I'm just going to read it out and I'm going to hopefully answer it. Valeria is asking how to protect ideas, earn respect, and avoid becoming an aggressor. It's a typical scenario when collaborating with a founder or client who believes that things should be done their way. That's a tough one. Um, it's really important when you have those conversations to make sure you set the table right. And a lot of times, critiques that go off the rails, it happens because the table was not set properly. I cannot emphasize how important that setting the context, and especially the part about explaining the problem and why it's a problem. And hopefully, if you're really tying it to something that is a real problem for the product and for the users, and is something that the founder or a client understand why that it's a problem, that can help bridge that. Otherwise, they're gonna argue about, oh, I don't think it's you it's the reason they would say it's not. You're eliminating those, oh well, I don't like the color, and those things that don't talk about specifically, is this solution right for the problem that you're solving. Again, it's not a foolproof solution. There's always going to be people who uh it's their way or the highway. um but this happens more in a design review rather than a design critique. Um, you wouldn't invite a client to a design critique until you feel super comfortable, not only with your design team, but with the stakeholders within the company. If you're working at an agency, for example, and you're presenting to clients, you need to make sure you do those critiques with not only the designers, but the client people, the project management, engineering, everyone involved before you go and you invite a client to this very, very special activity, if at all. Thank you. That's a good question. Thank you. A question from Summer. I find it more common that I'm being critiqued by non design roles, devs, PMs, clients, marketing, art direction, or folks who don't have as much bias and training in giving clean critiques or feedback. Um, that is very, that is usually the starting point. That is where a lot of us are starting from. Because the framework I just talked about, um, it's not something that is very natural. It's not something that happens, I would say, naturally in organizations. You really have to, even if you do the setting the table right and you present everything great, a lot of times people just use the poop sandwich if they're being nice, if they care about being nice. Um, that's why you have to start small. You have to start with your own team and teach them the have you method. And then when you feel comfortable with them, you start growing that circle and you bring people into that. When you bring people into an established framework and they watch everyone else is asking those questions instead of making statements, that's when they start changing the way they approach that. Or you can even say, listen, we're not making statements in this session. Every question has to start with have you, or Summer is not going to answer anything. But again, this is about a critique, not about a review that basically asks the question, hey, client, do you think this is good? Thank you. Um, question from Cynthia. Any tips on giving feedback bottom up? Um, and I'm assuming the question here is about someone who's higher than you, um, presents something and asks for critique. Is that the intention here? I would assume so. Um, this framework is really good because again, it's all about asking questions, and it's all about and it removes that personal thing. It's never about I assume. If you ask questions, even if it's your boss and you ask, um, have you looked at the data from this thing? they're not they're not going to see it as a threat. They're going to hopefully see it as an opportunity to share more context and or coach or talk about things that again you may not be aware of. But it's really removes that personal thing. You're not attacking the person by asking a question. You're not asking why are you stupid. You're asking in a smart way. Have you looked into this? Have you considered this? um, have you considered the feedback we heard last week from the client? All those things. Again, um, like I said, this is not foolproof. There are always going to be people who don't know how to take these things, even with the best of intentions. But for 90 something percent of the people, setting that framework is going to be extremely helpful. And you're going to kind of practice it, learn together. I've done this session in person as a workshop, and it's so hard for people to get used to asking, have you? Like, it's so easy for us to slip back into telling people how to fix their designs when you have almost zero context into why they did something. It takes a lot of practice asking that have you. But once you get into it, it's also going to make you feel better about yourself. You're not attacking someone, you're trying to learn together with them. And you're going to make them feel better because they're not going to be they're not going to perceive you as attacking them. It's really fun. Thank you, Cynthia. Valeria. Oh, I think we had that question before. Um, so here, another question from Valeria. Are there any additional tips on how to provide feedback to junior designers as a more experienced one? Follow this framework. Um, and again, I'm not talking about a junior coming to you and ask, even if someone junior comes to you and asks, "Hey, can I show you something? I'd really love your feedback." And they present the work. First of all, this is a really good teachable moment to make sure that they present well. Make sure they set the stage. Make sure that they um, set the context, and then all the things that is in the set the table section. Once you, because again, they're learning how to do it, and the better they do, the quicker they learn how to do that, the better they're going to be set up for success. And once they do that, use this framework. Say what's working and explain what you're doing. Say, okay, now I'm going to tell you what is working about your designs because I don't want you to change those things. Those things are great. You should keep them in. And now I'm going to ask you questions about things that I just need more context on. Have you and all that. So you're teaching the framework as you're using it, and by by using it, by showing, by modeling that framework, you're first of all teaching them um, that it's okay to show work, that you're not going to bite their head off, and you're teaching them how to do that with others as well. So there's nothing better than working with a junior designer on and teaching them that framework. Jonathan asks, Guy, have you ever presented a list of sample have you questions prior to design critique meetings? I'm loving the list of sample questions I hear you mention. Um, I haven't. A lot of times, if I do it in like a live, like a real design critique, not teaching this framework like in this session, if I do an actual design critique, I would model that. I would say, okay, today we're all going to learn a new framework of doing a design critique. And just like like I showed an example with a junior, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to explain the steps as I'm doing them. And then, I'm going to ask someone to present. And then I'm going to say, okay, now when we get to step 4, now I'm going to show you how I ask questions to remove the personal aspect. And then I'm going to model those have you questions. So that's the best way to do. Just model that instead of giving examples, because if you do it in context, it's much more powerful. That's a great question, Jonathan. Thank you. Will is asking, are there any resources that would be good to reference for developing this skill? Books, online critiques, etc. Um, I think there was a good book. I don't remember its name. It's been a really long time since I read it. It was about um, presenting designs or critiquing. It was something like that. Um, that was, I think, I took a lot from that book and sort of put into this presentation. Um, I can't, off the top of my head, think of anything right now. But again, you have a lot of the I'd say the basics and the important stuff already in this presentation. You're already ahead of so many other people who keep using the poop sandwich method. Thank you for the question. Do we have any more questions, Summer? Uh, Leah is asking, how would you respond when a recipient of a critique is becoming defensive to your feedback or the feedback from others? It can happen. We're human, um, but there's no guarantee how someone is going to take it. Hopefully, um, at this stage, you're not springing this framework out of the blue. You're walking people who are new to it. You're walking them through it. You're teaching them. You're showing them how you're using it, and it's a nothing here is a secret. You can say, "I'm going to use questions instead of statements." So, and and the intention is not to be defensive. The intention is to for me to really understand what's behind your design and show that genuine interest. Because if you're doing, it's really easy for people a lot of the time to understand or to realize when someone is not being genuine, when someone is coming from a point of, I know better than you, what you did is dumb. That's when people get defensive. But if you're genuinely interested in understanding more about the design and the decisions the designer made, hopefully it comes out in the way you ask those questions. um, that is the best way to do it. That's a great question, thank you. Abby asks, any tips on teaching stakeholders to use this feedback framework? Um, by inviting them, I would say, hopefully, you have a good relationship with them and you can ask them to observe and not ask any questions. Or if they have questions, to write them down and you can take them and then you can translate it to a have you. Like if you have a stakeholder sitting there and instead of the stakeholder asking, um, why are you doing this? We already said this color is wrong. They can hand you that question and you can, um, have you considered how this color is working with our established brand? Like you translate it in for the for the purposes of the critique, so it doesn't come from a personal attack. Um, even if the stakeholder did not mean that at all, we know that intent and impact are not always the same thing. But if you're the mediator, if you translate it into the way it is, you're showing, first of all, you're lowering the defenses. You're not making the designer defensive, but also you're modeling to the stakeholder, this is how we do it here, because the result is going to be the same. The stakeholder is going to learn, is going to get an answer to their question, but you can ask the questions in different ways. Thank you, great question.
I think we answer all the questions in the chat here, in the Q&A here. Any more questions we didn't answer?
I think there's a couple more. I'm just trying to find ones that. Yeah, there's a good question here from Summer, is asking why leads to open questions and asking have you leads to closed. How does it lead to better feedback? Um, it leads to better feedback because you're not assuming. And again, it's not the better feedback, but um, it's about an intention to learn as a group. It's if I ask, why did you do something this way? There's an implicit assumption here that something is wrong. That I know better than you. I would have done it differently. Why did you do it this way? Asking why questions is very problematic a lot of the times, especially when you have uh, different power dynamics. Like if your boss asks you, why did you do it this way? It has an implicit meaning in there. When you ask, have you, you're really coming from a place of um, genuine interest. Um, for example, not even about design critiques. I've been using this system for several years now. It took me a while to get used to it, to get used to this mindset. Um, but I really, practice makes perfect. I'm not saying I'm perfect by any means, but by practicing that, it also helps me in other areas. Like for example, um, I've noticed that when let's say I'm in a meeting and someone says something that I really think is wrong, or I'm not, what are they talking about? Instead of getting upset, instead of getting frustrated, I kind of trained myself that the first thing I ask is, what am I missing here? What am I not aware of? And that's exactly that mindset you have here. What am I missing? I mean, there has to be a good reason why the designer did things the way they did. It could be because that was the only thing. I mean, like not considering other things is also a reason, right? I mean, maybe they should have, but maybe they also, and considering different things and making an informed decision could be an answer as well. I don't know. This is why, have you considered, have you done this, have you looked into that, is another form of, um, I think I'm missing something here. Help me see what I'm not seeing. It's really about that. And it's really about making sure we all have that understanding together. And again, I may, we all know that design, you can solve the same problem in a lot of different ways. And no, like, there's no one best way ever to solve a problem. If I ask, why did you do things in a certain way, it directs towards a specific solution. But if I come here genuinely interested in learning why they did something in a certain way, what am I missing? I wouldn't have done it this way. Help me understand how you got there. I'm learning a new thing. I'm learning a new approach. I'm learning a new direction. I'm learning a new way to solve something. And this is really about diversity of thought. It really helps encourage that and welcomes that. That's a great question. Thank you. There's a good question here at the bottom from Valeria: how to encourage a team to follow an agenda. Uh, Sometimes I feel the meeting goes in a wrong direction. You need a strong facilitator or moderator of a meeting. Like seriously, you need someone like with an iron fist who rules the meeting and really is not afraid to tell people in the beginning, I'm going to keep you on track. And if we need to, like, we're going to put things in a parking lot if we need to. But I really want to make sure that we stay on track for this. And again, don't be afraid to do it. Let's see. Melissa here asks, when the presenter asks, have you thought about this? And you have. Do you show them that or just speak to it? Um, Really up to you. It really depends on what we're talking about. If they ask, have you considered red instead of blue? And you can say, yeah, it just didn't test well. Or you can show them, look how terrible it looks. It's really up to you. Whatever you think would make the biggest impact, whatever would help drive your point home best. Thank you. That's another question here from Summer. I think we may end on that one. Um, Second part of the process, audience. They sometimes might be hesitant to say they don't understand so they don't look silly in front of their peers. How to build trust quickly with new teams. Um, that is a very, very big question that goes outside of the design critique, because this is about really building that psychological safety, the the creating a safe place for people to look silly in front of other people. This is more about team building. If you decide to start with the design critique in that case, and you're the one leading it, be silly, ask those questions, be vulnerable. Like, that's how you show other people that it's okay. Like, you can be silly, you can be vulnerable, and nothing bad happens. The world didn't end. That's how you model that behavior, and hopefully other people feel comfortable doing it. There's uh, the worst thing can be that you can do is not ask questions, because um you're preventing other people from considering different perspectives. You're not letting um other people enjoy what you have to offer. I think that is all for now, right, Summer? Summer is facilitating this session with an iron fist.
Yes, thank you everyone who joined our room, and special thank you to Guy for sharing your insightful and tips. And then don't assume, be curious, uh, be silly, be vulnerable, ask the questions, because sometimes you help other people and they have the same question they're afraid to ask. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, Summer Chen, CHANG. Guy, how do people follow your work?
Yeah, so I'm gonna do a shameless plug here. Um, as Summer mentioned at the beginning, I have a podcast. I started it in the beginning of the year, and it's called Design Downtime. You can go to designdowntime.com, and it is all about showing that you can be a successful designer and a design professional without making your life about work 24/7. Every episode, I talk to a designer or someone in design about something they love to do that has nothing to do with work. Um, Season one had 16 stories. Season two starts tomorrow morning with an incredible episode. I could not be more excited. So if you enjoy podcasts, and you enjoy hearing designers talk about things that are not design, this is the perfect podcast for you.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy BMO Festival.
Thank you, everyone.